just going to point out a few that are general that can be used for any test. And then we'll look at some reading and some specific math test taking strategies. This is good for state testing. I work with some kiddos and their parents have told me, they need to get a certain score to be able to move on to the next grade. They need to pass this test to be able to move on to the next grade. I know in my hometown, we do our standardized testing. It's not so the kids move on to the next grade, but it's more so grading our district on how the teachers are giving the material. Are they understanding it? Do they know what's going on? We test in math, reading, and science, but luckily for us, we don't worry about that to move on to the next grade. But that puts a lot of stress and pressure on the kids. So hopefully you can take some of this and work with your children on some test taking strategies. So there are a couple of reasons why we take tests, just like the basics, to show what you already know or to see what your child still might need to learn. Again, these will work also with just everyday testing, spelling tests, reading tests, math exams. So you can take it multiple places and not just with the standardized or your state testing. So teachers give a test to see if something they've been teaching the kiddos understand. So just taking a look at this example. So everything that's circled is marked wrong. So that means the teacher can go back, look at the skill for whatever question 2 was, math, reading, science, whatever, and see, oh, okay, maybe I need to revisit this again. And something that I stress to my students in my classroom, I stress it to my own children. You don't have to know all of the answers on the test. And that's something that comes along with the pressure of these standardized tests, or even just your math test at the end of the week. It's important to stress this to kids. It is okay. You do not have to know every single answer. And I mean, this was something I even struggled with growing up. I had to be an A student. So like a pretest, for example, sometimes things are purposely put there to see, oh, okay, well, everyone already knows, let's just say rounding with the to the tens place. Okay, well, then let's focus on rounding to the hundreds. So it's a good thing too to see, what skill to focus on and what skills, you can just kind of give instruction and then move on to the next thing. Another thing too, so different areas teach different things at different times. I actually had a couple of the parents that I work with, say they have family in Florida and, they're doing this right now in math. Their kiddo is in the same grade as theirs. And, maybe they're from Texas and not doing the same things. It all depends on, your state guidelines, your state standards. Everyone has different, some things line up and some things don't. So never compare yourself to someone else. So let's say you have questions that you don't know the answer to, and that's okay. As long as you try your best, even when it's hard, that is all that matters. So what matters the most when taking a test? Trying your hardest, for sure. All right, so being physically ready for a test. And this just gives an example. So me and Alicia are twins. They are going to take the same test. They studied. They usually get the same grades. They perform really well. Why is it important to be physically ready? So the night before the test, Mia is going to bed early. She's getting plenty of rest. But her friend, on the other hand, she's like, oh, I know the material. I'm just going to stay up late. I'm going to watch movies. I'm going to play my video games. What do you think is going to happen? Another thing also with getting sleep, making sure that you're eating that healthy breakfast. And of course, Alicia was up all night playing her video game, so she didn't have time to eat breakfast. Another thing also that you might not think about is, wearing comfortable clothing. Again, Alicia woke up late. She couldn't find her jacket, so she's a little cold and uncomfortable. So of course, Mia's going to do better on the test. Even though they both studied the same amount of time, getting good rest, and that goes for everything too, not just test taking. Get a good night's rest, make sure your body is ready, hydrate, eat your breakfast, and just make sure that you're dressed well and comfortable. Okay, I'm going to skip through this. All right. So another thing is crossing out answers. And I know for myself personally, multiple choice, it just gives me anxiety. But there are some things that you can do, to ease that anxiety and get this done on the exam. So cross out answers that you don't know. There's always going to be one that is just like way out there, doesn't match, which is going to be the next example. So cross off the silly answers, cross off the ones that you know are wrong. And again, I mean, multiple choice you can see those in math, science, reading, even spelling sometimes. All right. So just an example. So she's going through who was Little Red Riding Hood going to visit. So she's crossed off the Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid wasn't even in the story with Red Riding Hood. So we know that that one's not going to be the answer. Crossing off the wolf. So it wasn't the wolf, because why would she want to go visit the wolf? So that means there's two answers left. It's either her aunt or her grandmother. She thinks it's her grandmother, but another good strategy, check back in the text just to make sure that your answer is correct. And there are many closed reading passages that you can find online as well to prepare for these multiple choice questions, that they make you go back and highlight things in the text to show where you found your answer. So that is definitely a great thing to practice with your child or children. All right, so skipping and returning. This is a big thing. So Michael here, he skipped the first one, and then he went back and he answered all the questions, the rest of them 1 through 8. Whereas William had it set in his head, I need to make sure I'm getting everyone right. I am not moving on to the next answer until I know that I am 100% correct. So what happened? William wasn't able to finish his test. Now, I know some districts too allow you to have extra time to complete something. But you don't want to spend an entire day whenever you can use the strategy, skip the question, and then go right back to it. So if you see a problem that's really hard, it's going to take you a long time. Like, for example, number 1, 15,975 divided by 25. Yeah, that's going to be a really long division problem. So let me go to these easier ones first, and then I'll come back to the one that was more difficult. It's okay to skip a question. And I know even, my own kiddos that I work with every day where I teach, there's a lot of anxiety that comes along with this. They're like, I don't want to skip any questions. What if I forget to come back to it later? You can always mark on there or even like circle the answer so to come back to that one. And at the end, let's say you have like a minute left to answer this math question, and that's okay. You got everything else done except for these few questions. Don't leave it blank. Then, because then you're guaranteed that it's going to be incorrect. Never leave anything blank. Just take your best educated guess and then be done. Because a blank answer is always going to be a wrong answer. All right. Okay, so just a few tips for general exam testing. Be ready. Eat your breakfast. Get a good night's sleep. Study a good amount of time and then give your brain a break. Cross out answers. Cross out the ones are correct, or the one that is like way out there in left field. Skip and return. You see a problem like, oh my gosh, thinking your head's going to take me forever to answer. Skip that one. Do the ones that are quick. and then come back. There's absolutely no problem. You don't have to go in one specific order. And then don't leave any blanks. If you leave something blank, then it's a guaranteed wrong answer. So it's always good just to guess. All right, so let's take a look into some test taking strategies specifically for reading. And again, there are many other things out there. These are just like specific things that I have used with my own children and in my classroom. I have been teaching for the past 10 years. All right. Sorry, I got to keep moving my camera around here to get it out of the way of my PowerPoint. All right. So the first tip for reading, preview the answers before you read. Preview the questions. There's a question here, who is the main character or who got lost on the trip? Look at the questions, scope out the answers. You don't have to spend like a long time staring at the questions, but it's good to have that in your brain. So then when you go to read, like, oh my gosh, okay. So they traveled to, I'm not sure the 100% the correct answer. Let's just say it's France. It said they were packing their bags, getting ready. The family's heading to France. Oh, I remember that was a question. Go back and put in your answer real quick. All right, so looking at the picture of the students below. So what color of shoes did the girl with red hair have? I have no idea. I wasn't really focused on the girl with red hair. So I'm just going to take a guess and just say she was wearing pink. So the answer was green. Now, if you look at the question beforehand, so what color of hair does the boy with glasses have? Who are we going to be looking for? The boy wearing the glasses. So now I'm looking at the picture. I know the question beforehand. Oh, here he is. He has some brown hair. I'm going to go back and answer my question. He had brown hair. So it's easier to look for the answer when you know what you're looking for. And also, in some tests, standardized, just a regular day school testing, some of the paragraphs are really long. It might be a couple of pages, especially as you're getting into the older grades. It's going to become more difficult. So using that strategy of looking at the questions or looking at the answers ahead of time will help you as you're moving forward and reading through. You find an answer, highlight it, underline it, or you could just simply go to that question in the test, mark your answer, get back to your reading. So there's a few different ways that you can do that. All right, so the same way when you're taking your reading test, if you know what you look for, again, before reading the passage, it's going to be easier to find the answer. I know my students, we have been working on going back and highlighting where we found it and then putting our answer. Again, same thing that they said here, looking at the questions, reading, oh, I saw that in there, go mark the answer, underline it, circle it, whatever works best. And you can practice all those things at home with your kiddos just to know what would work best with them. All right, I'm going to skip through this part. Okay, the next thing is summarizing. Again, I use this with my own kiddos, at home and in the classroom. And when you think of a summary, I mean, let's say you're reading something and it's like 10 paragraphs. You only need to pull one thing from each paragraph in order to make your summary. Find the most important thing, write it down, highlight it, move on to the next. A lot of things too, and I'm even was guilty of this when I was in school. If I wasn't interested, I mean, I was a fluent reader, but when it came to answer the comprehension questions, I was like, yeah, I have no idea what I just read. So thinking in your head as you're reading, make the characters come to life. I mean, even if it's nonfiction, you can visualize what is happening, give the characters a face, even if you have no idea what they look like. I tell my kids, make a movie in your head. We'll read the first paragraph, discuss, have them, think about what they're reading, put faces, put names, just picture the whole scenery. Discuss, go back to the next paragraph and do the same thing. So kind of like picturing what is happening and then discussing it. I mean, obviously during a test, you can't be like, oh, hey, let me tell you what I just read. I want to share some things with you. They can summarize things in their heads to make it easier when it comes back to the questions. So here, he's just practicing, he read a couple of paragraphs. All right, let me see what I remember. Highlight, underline anything you need to, say the most important things in your head. And two, if like you're talking and saying things back to yourself, I mean, I do that whenever I need to make my grocery list. Then it helps you remember the main points that you're able to better answer the questions, and you have to take less time going back and looking up every single answer. All right, so summarizing a paragraph. So just to give you an example, so we have this long paragraph here. Nick's going to visit his grandma for the summer. He's nervous. He's never been away from his parents before. He's worried he might get homesick, worried he might get bored, worried he might miss his friends, worried that he still had to go and it was coming soon, packing up his clothes. So you can use the vocabulary here also. What was the main thing that was happening? He was worried about visiting his grandma. He was thinking about a lot of things, getting bored, missing his friends, his family. So when you're summarizing, again, just pulling out that one main part, it doesn't have to be 2 or 3 sentences. It's one main thing from each paragraph. All right. So the biggest thing with reading, previewing the answers and then summarizing. And even with reading too, going back to just the general test taking strategies, cross out the answers that are definitely wrong. I've practiced tests and I have seen a character that the name wasn't even in the story. So you can use multiple strategies together, to help ease those frustrations and anxieties of test taking. All right, let's get into some math strategies. All right, scratch paper. I know and I have this battle with my kids at home and my kids at school. Nobody wants to show their work. But for the complex problems, it would be a good idea. And, you can explain also, you do not have to show your work for every single question. Let's say, just like in that example in the general test taking strategies, the question's 10 minus 2, and then you have like the 15,579 divided by 25. You can pick and choose which ones, but it is important to encourage the more complicated questions to show your work. Yes, it's an extra step, but you're prone to get the correct answer if you're taking your time and doing it. Again, you do not need to do that with every single one. And this is just, giving an example. Another thing too is drawing pictures or diagrams, especially if it is like the negatives, getting into algebra, multiplication, division. Those are all great ones to use pictures and diagrams for. So you can kind of talk with your kiddo about that and decide, okay, which problems should we work on with the scratch paper? Which ones should we show diagrams or even just like drawing pictures? Talk about that ahead of time, and then they can have that idea in their heads. All right, so this one's just an example. So it has Jake, Allie, Zoe, and Dan all ran a race together. Dan got 3rd place. Zoe was right behind Dan. I've always loved these questions in school, just because I was like one of those big math nerds. So that's this stuff excites me. But again, here's an example of drawing and labeling. So Dan got third place. Well, we know that we can put Dan right there in third place. Zoe is right behind Dan. So what does that mean? Well, Zoe's going to be fourth. So then we know first and second place are left. So it's easy to see the answer. Allie finished before Jake. Okay, well, I can't put Allie here. I can't put Allie here. She finished before Jake, so she must have gotten first place. And then there's only one left. So Jake would go into second place. So drawing diagrams and seeing things and working it out. I mean, especially in math, I can't stress that enough. You know, having those visuals makes everything just go so much smoother. All right, so using the correct operation. This is another big thing. Going over just like vocabulary, you know, how do you know when we have to subtract, add, divide, or multiply? And especially with multi-step word problems, this one will definitely come handy. So underline your keywords. So here we have Asa and Bill both earned money selling cookies. Asa earned $4 and Bill earned $5. How much do they have all together? All together. That would be the one that you would circle. Okay, what does all together mean? Am I going to divide, add, multiply? You know, talk it through. Kate jumped 10 times and Annie jumped 7 times. How many more times did Kate jump than Annie? This is another big one to really explain and go through. You know, a lot of kiddos just want to jump right to addition, but it wants to know how many more times Kate jumped than Annie because Kate jumped the most times. Divided. So the class had 30 students divided into groups of 5. Again, circling or underlining whatever you need to do with that keyword. Also, this would be a good one here too, to show your groups to be able to solve the problems. So using that diagram like in the last one. A girl brought 30 cookies for the 10 people in class. How many cookies does each child get? All right. You can also plug in your answers at the end to see if it makes sense. Go through the vocabulary. I mean, and there are so many free resources online that you can use. Just like print it out, you do it on your computer, you can show them from your phone, whatever you need to do. Read the problem, talk it through, point out those big keywords, talk it through to see, you know, which operation that you do need to use. Sometimes there's multiple steps. You know, you might have to do addition first and then subtraction, or multiply and then subtract. So you can discuss all of those things using those keywords. Another thing, double checking your work. You do not have to double check everything. You know, that is a misconception. And a lot of kiddos are like, oh my gosh, I already had to do the work. This is going to take me forever. You do not have to double check everything, but it is good to go through some of them just because sometimes you do make little silly, easy mistakes, and it happens, you know, as kiddos are rushing through to try to get done. So going back and double checking things is a really great strategy for math. So again, does that mean I have to do the whole test again? No, absolutely not. When you're doing the test the first time, it does take longer because, for one, you're seeing the problems for the first time and you have to figure out how you're going to solve them, you know, especially the ones where you have to choose which operation. But when you double check, it is quicker. Go through the equation, make sure you didn't make any errors or accidentally read the question wrong. You know, go back and make sure that you looked at the keyword and you correctly picked out the one that you needed to use. So here, just an example, we have 2,751 plus 213. So she's going back, double checking her work. She realized that she missed a complete section here. She forgot to add the thousands place. So just like briefly going and checking your work is really helpful. Again, in the math, okay. She multiplied everything, right? So 8 times 5, 0, carry the 4. 8 times 2 is 16, but he forgot to add the part where he had to carry. So again, just a careless, silly mistake. Going back and double checking is definitely going to help with that. All right, so reviewing everything for math using that scratch paper. Knowing what keywords to look for before you decide on how you're going to solve the problem. And again, if you're even unsure yourself, there are so many resources for free out there that you can discuss vocabulary beforehand and then try some problems. Double checking your work. Again, especially with math, you know, a lot of kiddos rush through. I was even guilty of rushing through when I was a kid. And then when I did go back, I was like, oh, you know, I really did make these small errors because I wasn't 100% paying attention. I was just not really rushing through the problem, but it does happen. Okay. So again, just to go back to reviewing the general, because it works, it can work for everything, just being ready, crossing out answers, skipping and returning, don't leave anything blank. Same thing you can use in reading, crossing out those answers for the multiplication. Just to reiterate some things that we talked about in the reading, you know, going back and looking for the answer, reading the questions beforehand, looking at the answers beforehand. Personally, I feel that looking at the questions beforehand compared to the answers, you will have better success. Make a movie in your head. Picture exactly what is going on, what is happening. These are all things, you know, pretty simple things, you know, that sometimes we forget about. Be great to go back and, you know, work on your kiddos with things, not just with state testing, not just with standardized testing, but, you know, for anything that, you know, they may be struggling with, having anxieties about, worries, you know, just something to help ease that stress. So I hope you take something back with you that maybe you didn't know or learned. You can start practicing with your kiddos at home. It was nice being with all of you this evening, and I will see you again soon with my next topic.